Good evening, everybody. This is Cinnamon Noir.
And this is the Ramen Shaman.
Welcome back to Rayman Legends. So, we're going to start with the last session of doing Lucky Tickets. I did eventually get bored with this, enthralling as it is. Probably just shortly after the audience gets bored with it, but, you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I realized later that if you get 6 lums, you get 10,000 out of it. But I think there's only one of those tickets in the whole game, and I've already gotten it, so I have nothing to look forward to on that front. It is a shame, given that they really hype up these tickets, how few interesting things you actually get out of them. The major thing is just the Back to Origins levels. Like, you can get teensies from them, but that's just because they inflated the number of teensies so much. They could easily have done without that aspect of things. I feel like they were reaching a little bit to have, you know, something that you can use a lucky ticket for if you get one from every level. Because there are a lot of levels in this game, and they needed to make sure you had something unique to win from every single one. But I think they overdid it. Another interesting thing about it is that you unlock these Back to Origins levels, and by going through them, you can also get further lucky tickets. So there's this weird sort of, I guess, virtuous circle, you might say, where you keep getting more lucky tickets from it. Anyway, you've never played Rayman Origins, right, Greg?
I don't believe I have.
So I thought we'd open this video, since the second half of Toad's story is kind of short, with a Back to Origins level. This is the only one we're going to be doing. Because, frankly, for one thing, I've already played through this whole game before, and they don't change that much. But for another, other people might have played Origins, and really, Origins is a good enough game to deserve its own special Let's Play. I would recommend Wugga's, Something Wugga on YouTube, who's from Something Awful. He's really good. But in any case. So this is extremely similar to the first level from Rayman Origins. Like, just the opener. They do make things a little harder. Like, that thing is a lot more aggressive than the thing that's in the original Rayman Origins. They basically do a lot of aesthetic changes as well. They completely changed the graphical style to suit this game more. By the way, do you remember in the last video I was telling you about those things they use to guard doors? That thing I just hit was one of them. It's basically just like a gooey web thing with an eyeball in the middle. We also hear some of the original soundtrack, which, whenever you're going through sort of a stealth area, it'll play this little riff. This is based on... Sorry, what?
I was gonna say, I imagine the Pink Panther theme.
Yeah. It's not an overt reference. Like, this game features far more overt references to other songs. But I can definitely see how you'd be reminded of it. They play a theme very similar to this one in some of the levels in Legends. This is basically a minor key version of the riff that is used throughout Rayman Origins, what you might call the game's theme. Which Rayman Origins actually has one. Rayman Legends arguably does not. There is a theme that plays when you're in the various like level hallways, which I guess might count. But it's a really simple theme. And it's always whistled. I don't know if you'd noticed that there was whistling in the hallways.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But
maybe I'll bring that up the next time we're back in Toad's story.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I have to say, the first level of Origins was never one of my favorites. The original also had at least one set piece in it, which this game does not because it's story-related. You rescue a fairy. You know, since there are no fairies in this game, at least none that I recognized, there's really no reason for it to do that. Also in Origins, something you don't see in this, Origins only gradually introduced Rayman's full moveset. So you actually had to be gifted the ability to punch, kind of like the earlier Rayman games. And so early on in this level, you might have noticed there's a lot of things where you don't need to hit anything. That's because when you went through that in Origins, you didn't have the ability to. So this game, on the contrary, it starts you with Rayman's full moveset, and even though it sort of teaches you how to do stuff, it never gives you a new power. Which, in one sense, is a little disappointing, to be honest. It makes Rayman Origins feel a little bit more epic than this. I like the concept of introducing new powers that you don't have before. It encourages backtracking, and I would say the good kind of backtracking, where you look at a level a different way. which of course you really can't do in this game. Levels are always the same whenever you play them. The only reason to replay them is to get teen season stuff you missed the first time. Or I guess to do a time, beat your last time, but I've never been into that.
Yeah.
There are time trials in this game too, just like Origins, and I don't like them at all.
I can see why you wouldn't.
Some games, I can appreciate the benefits of time stuff. I don't think Rayman is the kind of game that benefits from it, though.
Ooh.
It's much more about the spectacle and the different set pieces you get. One thing I would say is I don't think Rayman is a very mechanically tight game. It might seem a little strange. It's a very fair game, but it's not the kind where I feel like you could know for a fact that you were going to be fast.
I can see what you mean there.
And there's a lot of little distractions that would slow you down. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just not my cup of tea. Throughout this playthrough, I am not going to be doing the time trials. I'm not going to be doing the invasion stuff. I think I do one just to show it off.
Well, I've never been huge for time trials in general.
Well, sure. So I am going to treat this as if the game were just a story mode. Even though you could argue the story in this game is very light. Basically what we saw in the last world, where Rayman, rescued a teensy princess, then caught up with the evil magician and knocked him into a pig constellation. That's every world. They all proceed that way, with minor variations. There is something near the end that is a little bit more set-piecey, but it doesn't come close to Origins, which I would say feels much more like it has both a difficulty curve and a story.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say design... Well, I guess a design philosophy would be kind of unfair. Because this seems to have that.
It does, no question about it. And it has themes, there is a progression. It's just not an entirely compelling one.
That's true.
One thing that Origins had that this game does not, although I'm not entirely sad it's missing, is in Origins, in the middle of every world, there would be a flying shooter level, which would take you past a bunch of scenery and also give you a transition between one part of the level and another.
Huh, that's weird.
It was kind of cool. Although I don't like shooter levels, so I guess mechanically I'm glad they're gone, but thematically I wish they were still here. Or something like them. Yeah. Levels that are a bit faster. And not faster in the sense of being a challenge gauntlet, but just in the sense that you cover a lot of ground. That is kind of missing from Legends.
I think I know what you mean.
Anyway, here we are back in Toad Story. More beanstalks for obvious reasons. Although now we seem to be in beanstalks that are in the clouds, rather than on ground level. And mechanics are getting a little more complicated here, but this is actually very similar to the second level. So similar that I don't like it as much.
Aww.
Feels a little bit like a retread. Speaking of retreads, this level is basically a retread of the one from level 2, except that it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, and viewers, if the commentary seems a little desultory so far in this game, I would say it's because it really hasn't hit its stride yet. It's World 3 where this game really starts getting bonkers. And I think I'll probably be a little more animated by that point. This is all very nice. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Does it really get more complex with the mechanics and take them to more interesting places?
It gets a little more complex with the mechanics and also introduces new ones, but what I would say more is just that in terms of what you're seeing, it gets crazy.
Oh.
It does get a little bit difficult, but I will say, this is a fairly easy game. Bear in mind I've played platformers my whole life, so that's conditioned by that. I'm mostly comparing it with Origins, which to me got very difficult near the end. This game does not get very difficult near the end. It has a fairly consistent level of difficulty all the way through.
Well, I would applaud that, personally.
Well, it's not a bad thing. It's just something I've noticed. I make a distinction between challenge and fun. I think challenge is fun when it's fair and, doable. But that doesn't mean that I need challenge in order to have fun. In fact, some of my favorite games are incredibly easy, have almost no challenge at all to them.
I am currently, I mentioned this before, playing Bloodborne, trying to beat the amygdala in the Defiled Chalice dungeon.
Yeah.
which is pretty much the best example I can think of challenge without fun.
Yeah, see, if I ever played a game like that, I think I would need to play a little bit of Kirby's Epic Yarn after every boss, just to unwind.
Yeah.
Kirby's Epic Yarn being one of the easiest games ever made. Some games, though, are sort of easier than their reputation would suggest. You know, like, I've been playing A Link Between Worlds lately. And that game, a lot of people said, well, it's really punishing. You know, every time you die, you lose all your items. But I didn't die during the whole game. So...
Oh.
It didn't feel punishing to me at all. It felt actually quite easy. Now, I do speak as someone who's played Zelda a lot, so that probably has something to do with it. It's very similar to A Link to the Past.
I'm not sure I love that concept, though.
Well, that has its own ups and downs. I thought I would hate it, but the funny thing is, it's not so much that I don't hate the concept, as that it simply didn't apply in my case. I never engaged with that particular mechanic.
I think that makes sense.
Because, you know, a game that's really punishing when you die is acceptable if you almost never die. You know, some people would say that if you're really careful, Dark Souls is kind of like that.
Oh, yeah, true.
I mean, not for most people, but for some. Technically, the game never punishes you if you never die, so, you know, just do that. Get undead.
I'm trying to think of an exception to that.
Well, there's Seath. I guess, you know, now that I think about it, I'm being stupid. Of course, the game punishes you for no reason, because there's Seath. Which is bullshit.
True.
No, but this game, of course, is the opposite. In Rayman Legends, you are expected to die quite a bit. I mean, I would say I'm fairly good at this game. I still die a lot. It's just that it's so easy to come back from it. I do think it's a little weird that they insisted on the same structure for all of these chase levels. You never actually rescue the damsel. You just get to the end and she squeezes his nose and escapes.
Huh.
And then he always cusses at you exactly the same way. I think they could have gone a little bit more out of bounds with this, you know? Like, I understand how the structure is going to be the same, but have different things happen, you know?
Yeah.
The game is fairly creative in its level design otherwise, so the fact that they insist on replaying all of these, you know, elements of it, it's curious to me. I don't know why they did it that way. You know, but who can fathom the mind of Mika Lansall, really? Anyway, we now finally have enough teensies to get to the next level, which is good. I hate to do stuff out of order.
I can understand that.
And that is the first invasion level that just showed up. So this game has kind of a weird twist on time trials. Instead of it being a time trial of a level you've already played before, it's a new area with theming from that level. And then enemies from a different world will be in it, which is a little strange. The idea is that enemies from the other worlds have invaded this world and captured teensies.
I guess that makes sense.
It's curious. I can't say much about it because I have played almost none of them. I will say that, like all time trials, they can be intensely frustrating. And since you basically earn teensies in them based on how fast you do it, like get a certain time, you get 1, get a faster time, you get 2, and up to 3. The cutoff for getting 3 is almost always incredibly tough. Like, more difficult than any actual level in the game, which I don't think is right.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of wrong. That was dumb.
Oop.
I literally smacked right into him. And you have no excuse for smacking into stuff in this game, because you can just keep punching over and over again.
Yeah.
So really, you should never get hit by a toad. Advice for life. So I find those little hooks interesting. They were in Teensies in Trouble, the first world. They were not in Rayman Origins, but it's a fairly simple mechanic. It's just, you grab onto the hook immediately when you hit it, and then you have to press down to come off of it.
Interesting.
So they use that in conjunction with moving platforms underneath you to basically turn it into a little waiting exercise. So you have to have good timing. They use it fairly well.
Sorry, I was going to say, I do like the parts where you have to wait for the lumps to come to you.
Yeah, right. It's a little difficult sometimes to tell which direction they're going. But the funny thing is often they have arranged them in such a way that it is better to wait for them to come than to actually try to get them. Ooh. Now the music's getting a little more intense because these thorns are getting more aggressive. You'll notice they're a darker color than they were. The earlier ones were this vibrant green, and these are kind of... They look almost dead. They're gray-green. More of these little hooks. They look kind of like old-fashioned door knockers, actually. One thing I like about this game is that things have a really neat design to them. So, you know, metal objects look bright and polished. It's very artsy.
That is true.
I wouldn't actually say it's cartoonish. It's almost like old-fashioned book illustrations.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. Oof. I just keep messing up here. Get used to this. This is a bit of a failure montage.
But it is definitely very well drawn. Oh god, I hate platforming sections like this.
Yeah, it can get annoying. Although, you can't hate on platforming if you're playing this game, because it's all platforming.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm not the one playing it.
You really think you couldn't do this, huh?
It's not so much that I couldn't, as that I don't really have the inclination to.
It's just so funny to me, because since I grew up with platformers, this stuff feels easy to me. Like, Dark Souls feels impossible compared with this. It's just funny, you know? Different people have different ideas of what is challenging. And I think it depends just a lot on which games you've played before, because most games are fairly simple once you get into the groove of how they're played.
True.
Like, in platformers, you have to move very fast, and in a game like the Souls games, you have to move very slow. So, platformers almost train you to rush into stuff, which is a very bad idea in Dark Souls. So I almost feel like getting good at a game like this makes you worse at methodical games. I'm not trying to excuse myself here. My Souls performance is still execrable, but... whatever.
Well. I mean, you do pretty well in Demon Souls. You've done better than me so far.
Yeah. I got lucky.
True.
King of Land is a bastard.
Well.
So, here we have another castle level, although this one is rather different because we get the shooting arm. Or fist. It's a little weird. In Rayman Origins, I think you got this power-up, but it was just like fists that floated behind you. This one is very cartoony. You might have noticed the fist literally has eyeballs.
Oh god.
It has googly eyes and this sort of grim expression.
That is bizarre.
I think if this were like a Saturday afternoon cartoon show, that fist would definitely talk. Although technically it's not the same fist, you keep shooting it, and it's multiple versions of itself.
No, oh yeah.
So how many of these fist people has Rayman sacrificed for his own needs?
That's just weird.
It's distressing. I don't like this game anymore. Anyway. No, I actually really like the sections where you get the shooting glove. Because it's sort of like a variation on those shooter levels from Rayman Origins. But you have more control in this thing, because you are determining how fast the screen scrolls. The shooter sections in Rayman Origins were auto-scrolling. So they felt more like a traditional shooter. This feels just like a platformer with a bit of a wrinkle in it. And one thing you may have noticed is that most of the enemies in this level are red toads, which breathe fire. So that sort of maintains the challenge. With the fist, obviously, if they were all green toads, it'd be way too easy.
Yeah.
You just fire off a barrage from off-screen, no problem. These things, however, will shoot at you. So you need to use the fist to counteract their bullets, as well as get rid of them. Something they do actually quite a lot in this. You'd be surprised how many different things you can destroy with the fist. However, those spiky fish are not one of them.
Interesting.
The spiky fish are weird. Even in Rayman Origins, despite the fact that they're fish, or at least look like fish, they only show up in the flying levels. They never show up underwater.
Huh.
Which is weird.
That is kind of odd.
Like, in Rayman Origins, when you were in the second world, you fought a giant bird. But the spiky things that you run into, they're not birds. They look like fish. Who knows? Maybe they were supposed to be birds, and it's just a weird design. But they always look like fish to me.
Birdfish? Flying fish?
There's no such thing. They could be flying fish. That's the one thing I might accept.
Why do flying fish fly?
They do that in order... they do that in order to get between different bodies of water, like if one's going to be drained. They live in kind of shallow water, so it's sort of like a safety feature for them. Like, you know, we need to get out of here, so we'll fly across the water.
Interesting.
That's also the reason why lungfish actually are able to be on dry land. It's not because they actually like being on land. The point is just to get to a different, you know, watery place.
Yeah.
I think there's some misconception that lungfish, like, live on land just because they can walk. That's not true at all. Them being on land is like, you know, us being in a spacesuit on the moon. It's not deliberate. Like, we're not going to live there. It's just, this is how we protect ourselves when we're in an unfamiliar environment.
It's a temporary solution.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Incidentally, I think I'm probably the first person in history to compare lungfish to astronauts, but anyway. That's probably only because lungfish are so rarely talked about in fiction. Unfortunately. The only game I've ever seen that had a lungfish in it was Psychonauts. Though, of course...
You know, I never thought of that until now.
It had enough lungfish for, like, 3 games.
Sure.
Very good depiction of lungfish.
That game had a lot of really weird designs.
It did. That's what made it great. Just to bring this back, it kind of reminds me of Rayman. It's got this very freewheeling design where it's like almost anything could appear in this game. We're going to see in the next world that they do some crazy things in terms of this game's aesthetics and set pieces. They've already done a few things that are a little out there, but overall I would say the first 2 worlds of this game are kind of tame. You know, they stick to very well-worn themes, like fantasy environments in platformers are as old as dirt. I mean, I think even Mario has had, like, a medieval-themed level at one point.
I mean, I guess there's medieval themes to Mario in general. At least with the, you know, royalty.
That's true. And the constant presence of castles all over the place.
And, you know, a princess.
Oh, yeah. Well, she is the only royalty. There's no king in the Mushroom Kingdom.
Bowser was sometimes...
Oh, no, you're right. He's the king of the Koopas. Well, okay. Anyway, this is a bit of a difficult section. You can't just jump on top of these guys, so you gotta hit them all out of the way. I'm also trying to get all these lungs. Not perfect. I think it took me a while to realize that you could shoot the fire. So that's why I'm messing up against these guys. To my... You know, just to redeem myself, it's not entirely intuitive that you could destroy a fireball by shooting a glove at it.
That is true.
I would think it would just burn right through it, you know? But you can destroy almost any projectile in this game with the fists. In any case.
I think there was one game where you could destroy certain projectiles and I didn't realize that forever. I'm trying to think what it is.
Yeah, it's always annoying. Anyway, having, you know, shot our fist at a bunch of toads in the air, now we're going to shoot our fist at a giant toad in midair.
Oh, God. That's
progression.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, this boss will be kind of curious. I'm not going to say anything more about it yet. I'll let it speak for himself. Almost literally, he does kind of talk. Very few things in this game say anything that's intelligible. One of the few exceptions is the Bubble Dreamer. I don't know if you noticed him out in the main area.
Interesting.
He was mostly a creation of Rayman Origins, although he is based on some concepts that were from earlier Rayman games, like Palocus from Rayman 2 sort of fulfilled the same role.
Oh yeah, the spirit of the world.
Yeah, he's the dreamer whose dreams created this world. I think Michelangelo loosely based it off himself, even though he doesn't look anything like him. But no, I made a mistake there, so we need to go back and get the boss.
God.
Yeah. There we go. These guys are always trying to fix their vehicles in a very desultory way, you know?
Yeah.
They don't seem very enthused about it. Oh yeah, so, here's the Armored Toad, who seems to be the henchman of this particular teensy. It's funny, a lot of the other teensies have, like, lots of henchmen. This guy just has the one. But he's kind of like an army in and of himself. This guy's design with, like, the bright metal and everything actually reminds me of Amanita Designs games. You know, the Samorost series and Botanicula and that kind of thing. It's a little too realistic looking for the cartoony art style of this. Oh, and I decided to get myself killed because I missed the teensy, which is just inexcusable.
Oh god.
The penalty is death. See, this guy has a force field. I don't know where it's coming from. Like, that's not a well-known power that toads have. To be fair, it doesn't seem to work terribly well. So yeah, make sure you get rid of that second brigade of toads fairly quickly, because they can mess you up quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I can see why you...
Of course, there's always the possibility
there,
of just being destroyed by the boss anyway.
Screw you up. Oop.
No. So you can see the ramping up difficulty here. The first time, these missiles just go and they go straight. But the second time, they're all homing missiles, which makes it a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
And I do so badly this time that I don't even manage to get rid of his armor in the first volley.
Oop.
I have to do this twice.
Ooh,
and lose a heart. Yeah, I'm not at the top of my game right now.
No. Oh well.
I also didn't notice until I got through this that he actually does 2 volleys of missiles.
This is
if you don't manage to get him quickly.
Cuphead.
Ah, a little bit. More forgiving than Cuphead, as per usual. There are a few games that are less forgiving than Cuphead. And most of those were direct inspirations for Cuphead, like Contra. Oh, but he's not out of it yet.
Ooh, yeah, no kidding.
I got him down to his underwear, but he's still fighting.
Although enemies don't have nearly as much health in this as they do.
That's right. No, this follows the typical...
Honestly, for the rest.
Definitely. This follows the typical Mario pattern of a 3-stage boss. You may have noticed the dragon in the last world was also a 3-stager.
Oh, yeah.
And now our reward. Let's punch this guy into the stratosphere. Oh, first I'm gonna have a little fun. Oh, I just can't get him out of there. I guess we'll have to apply a little more force. That did it. Cleared that blockage right out.
Yep.
Rayman the plumber.
That looks more like you're helping him start his car.
Oh, a little bit. If you could help start a car by kicking it really hard in the trunk.
Team Rocket.
So, every time you kick one of these guys into this meteor, a new part of the tune is added.
God.
It gets really good only at the end, I would say.
Wait, are those like devils tormenting them?
Yeah, that's right.
It's horrible.
They're not technically devils, they're aliens that look like little devils.
Complete with the pitchforks.
It's not horrible. I mean, these teensy magicians are the ones who are horrible. Look what they did.
I guess. I mean, they are guilty of kidnapping. But
exactly.
Still.
And they kidnapped all the other teensies.
Mm-hmm. True.
And they tried to sick a dragon on us. I mean, I think they deserve to get poked in the butt for eternity. They're like Loki. Oh, by the way, I lied. I think this is actually the last bit of Lucky Ticket hitting.
Mm-hmm.
We can already see why I eventually abandoned this as a part of the videos. I mean, it really is just sort of trash game content.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know why they make you scratch off the ticket, to be perfectly honest. They should just reveal it and tell you what you've won.
Okay.
It's so, like, fake, you know what I mean? You're not really interacting with anything. But I do get a few more Back to Origins levels, which is the one, you know, compensating virtue of this. So let's do Orchestral Chaos. That is the music level for this game. Sorry, for this world. Unfortunately, they do not do famous pop songs for all of these. This one is just a newly composed tune. You'll be happy to know, though, that there are several more pop songs to come. So yeah, pretty much the same thing as the last music level. You just gotta have good rhythm. Sorry, what?
It's got a different tempo.
It does. Pretty much all of them do. Oh, and I failed to jump at the right time there. One thing I really... Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is somewhere between Vivaldi and, like, the music you see in Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, gotta die again. One touch I really like about these is that they make the music slow down and do a record scratch when you mess up. It's as if your movement actually creates the sounds.
Uh-huh.
Which I think is what they're going for. The rhythm does feel ever so slightly off in this one, as it does in a couple of these levels, which makes it feel more visual than it is really a rhythm game. That's not quite a problem for these, because they're fairly simple levels. I've never really died to one of these more than 3 or 4 times. On the other hand, later on in the game, you get sort of enhanced versions of these levels, in which it is almost impossible to see what's going on. So you do have to rely entirely on rhythm. And that makes it start getting really annoying. Because, like I said, it's not perfect. But it doesn't have to be. But when it's not perfect in terms of rhythm, that means you're relying on your memory of what you're supposed to be doing, rather than actually relying on the beat. You know, the test of any rhythm game is, could you close your eyes and still beat the level? At least once you know what to do. So yeah, it's the end. About as difficult as the one in the first world, I would say. They're about the same level. They get a little harder later.
Yeah.
I missed quite a few lums there.
Oh, well.
You might have noticed at certain points they give you a huge number in sort of a cascade, so you have to hit that just right in order to get a ton of them. Anyway, that is it for now, and next time we will be heading to Fiesta de los Muertos, so we'll see you then, everybody.
The Feast of the Dead. Interesting.
Good
night,
the
everybody.
Festival of the Dead, technically. Good night.
Oh.